High school and green, royal we culture we clean. Fi straighten up something that them lean with transparency from the agency of the I Supreme. Cosmic intuition and initiation from within. I'm another angel and on a wing like pigeon. Concept by accept of I origin, representing free-minded article breaching. Man without a woman is like a house without kitchen. People without them roots is like plants for edging. Everything perish without oxygen. Them a vibration, them a waves, and them a sound palm rhythm. Hey! Time for the lions. Tell them one story. Listen to the lion voice, yeah?
What do you have to tell the people about Rastafari?
Light to the world. The king of kings and the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. I like himself. Where's rightful ruler? Hey yo! Eli! Hail them high, hail the black king on the 23rd of July. So tell them guy who praise God up in the sky, it's a lie. The Almighty living on your night. From ancient time them a try. Them Romans know them just open them suit and ties. Criminals ain't got no alibi, they stole my people. Then them comes without them genocide.
Are you talking about slavery?
Them couldn't kill. The lion will come conquer Judah tribe. Go through tribulation, and I strive, see sufferation, and I still rise. That's why we tell them in America, live Rastafari in every ghetto area. We come to tell them in a Toronto, straight to Ethiopia.
This is not just an important day for Rastafari, but this is an important day for the whole Pan-African community, because this was ground zero for the rising of the African continent, which continues today. Because as we're going to talk about when we talk about what is African Victory Day, this was the largest invasion on the African continent in modern times by the Roman government, aka the Italian army. So with that said, let's jump into what is African Liberation Day. So African Liberation Day celebrates May 5th, 1941, which was the day that Haile Selassie made his triumphant re-entry into Addis Ababa. And this date was significant because on May 5th, 1936, Addis Ababa was occupied by the Italian forces. So 5 years to the day that it was occupied, Haile Selassie made his triumphant re-entry, and that date was planned so that it could signify that, because it was a huge blow to Ethiopia when it fell. And to all of my science fiction, to the nerds, them, if you know about Star Wars, you know the Empire Strikes Back, when the evil empire takes over the galaxy, and we know the fiction is inspired by the modern day. So you can imagine May 5th, 1936 as an Empire Strikes Back moment, where everything looked desolate, everything looked dark, enemy forces occupying the last independent capital on the African continent, Addis Ababa. Remember, we have to set the stage, because this is the lions telling the story. And while we tell the story, before we get into the story, remember, I am also an author. I wrote Haile Selassie's Ethiopia, The Rise of the Priestly Warrior Kings, Volume 1. This book is written like an epic fantasy story. We are telling the story of Ethiopia because I think it's critical to everything that we are doing as we seek to rebuild Zion. We're building the heaven on earth. We have to restore the narrative, and Ethiopia earns a special place in that narrative. Why? Because of that unconquered genealogy. Ethiopia ties us all as Africans to that unconquered mass. And the name for Ethiopia during this period was Abyssinia. And it was given this by the Arabs because it was the land of mixed people. What that mean? That mean there was all type of black people. To this day, Ethiopia have the gambit of black people, from the Semitic black phenotype, Kushite, any type of black person, you will find them in Ethiopia. So Ethiopia to the Pan-African movement is very important to us because it represents a microcosm of the great African continent. Also, remember, it's part of the Rift Valley. It's the source of the Nile River. The Blue Nile starts in the highlands of Ethiopia. And remember that the Blue Nile supplies 2/3 of the Nile's overall water mass. So you have the Blue Nile in Ethiopia and you have the White Nile in Uganda. They connect in Khartoum in Sudan, and then they flow out into Egypt, which is basically a massive flood basin. So Ethiopia is always significant that this land, the land where the gods love to be, as the Greeks said, was never conquered. So this this white supremacy never was able to subdue the land of Ethiopia, this ancient land. And this is why, as Rastafari, we identify this as the seat of the Almighty, because it is what it is. And this is why I love Rastafari so much, because, as we tell the story, they are just unrefutable facts. So no matter if you like Ethiopia, you don't like Ethiopia, it cannot be denied that Ethiopia was never conquered. And then some people say, well, the Italians were there for 5 years. But guess what happened? They only had control over certain cities. They had no control over the countryside, and they were suffering great losses because of the efforts of the patriots. The country never gave in. The fighting never stopped, not one day. So this is why we call it Italian time in Ethiopia occupation, and that's why Ethiopia remains as the only country never conquered or colonized. There was never a time where the Italians had free reign over anywhere outside of the cities, and at that time Ethiopia did not even have as many cities as it now boasts. So the Italian influence was very limited during that period of occupation, and again they suffered tremendous losses, guerrilla warfare. Man, I take it to them every time them leave the city, So this was very important. Why did the Italians invade? The Italians, this was coming on this is the precursor to World War II. The fascist uprising, the fascists came to power. Italy was in economic turmoil prior to that. So the fascists put up Benito Mussolini as their figurehead, the fall guy, because they were also blessed by the Vatican. There's evidence to show that. But the fascists rise to power, and one of the things that Mussolini used to galvanize that public support was that he was going to avenge the Italians for Ottawa, and that the humiliation that the Italians suffered at Ottawa would be avenged. So when Italy came down into Ethiopia, this was not no easy thing. Ottawa, depending on the sources, up to 30,000 Italian men were dispatched to fight in Ottawa. At that time, it was the biggest colonial army that ever had marched on Africa. And this time was the same. Some estimates go up to 300,000 Italian soldiers. Largest land invasion of Africa in the modern era. There has been no other. And it just so happens, let's put on our spiritual cap, that this is Rome, the same Rome that crucified Yeshua, the same Rome that conquest over Egypt, the same Rome that had controlled most of the known world at one point, invading the land where the rulers are claiming to sit on the throne of King David, the great King David, and hold the Ark of the Covenant within their country. And remember that this is the same Rome that's supposed to be the seat of Peter. This is the holiest of the Christian nations according to the European story. So this nation invading this ancient African nation that has never been conquered or colonized with this size force, you can imagine.
no money, I'm short on cash. Plus a little bit I got to make it last. Some driving in the fast lane, drive too fast, and when they crash, no for them crack like glass. Some act like they never had no past. I ask them about the history, them grin and laugh. They don't know what we've been through, see what they into. I say I'm African, no, they say they Africans too. Well, who built the OAU? When I ask them for them now, they can't say who. How many stay true and seek that light? How many sell them soul for the money and hype? It's funny how money make a man delight. The same money turn around and make him lose his life. But who gonna teach the people them how to survive? But we not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna make sure that the black man rise? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna take the dogs and open their eyes? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna shine his light, reveal all lies? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Some ain't got money, they lost their job. Some ain't got money, so they steal and rob. Some work hard just to get the car and the house, get laid off, creditors are kicked out. Some sell rocks to the people for the love of the money. Some start doing evil. Some push dope in their veins. Who lost our hope? Some break the chains. Tell them about the lion who can't be tamed. Rule Mount Zion crowned with a new name. Might of the Trinity manifest in the flesh. Now the energy can't be contained. Who gonna teach the people them how to survive? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna make sure that the black people rise? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna take the stripper, open the eyes? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna shine his light, reveal our lies? We not the lion from Judah tribe. In the unemployment line, heart filled with soul but ain't got a dime. Babylon, they want confuse your mind. In the peace and calm, so hard to find. Babylon filled with distractions, so many got the thoughts, so few got the actions. Babylon seeks satisfaction, mental chain cause chain reaction. 500 years and look what happened. Black man either in jail or he's rapping. Oh, we gun clapping his brother when he see the other man, he run for cover. And brothers don't even treat their sisters right. How many sell them soul for the money and hype? It's funny how money make a man delight. The same money turn around and make him lose his life.